So I have a question for you. We are trying to create beautiful artwork, get good at drawing, and to do that we have to learn all these different skills and combine them together. So how are you approaching that? How are you learning all of these different skills? When I was starting out, my approach could be described as all at once. I wanted to learn everything all at once because I wanted the artwork to look good as quickly as possible. But as you can imagine, that didn't work out for me. What we really need is a series of exercises in the right order, because each skill builds on the next one. That makes sense, right? Like, now that I say that, it just seems insanely obvious. But what is that sequence? What do you need to learn, and what order do you learn it in? So let's get into it. My name's Kenzo, and this is Love Life Drawing. So as we get into the list, it might feel like, I'm listing a lot of things, but that is only because I've taken big topics and broken them down into smaller topics. So each of these things is pretty bite-sized. It's not going to be overwhelming to learn these things. I'm going to show some demos of each skill, but if you're at that stage where you're just starting to learn this thing, you wouldn't expect your drawings to look like the demo, because I'm drawing with more experience under my belt. So I'm also going to show some real examples from when I was learning all these things for the first time, so that you can get a clearer picture of what it might look like when you're at that stage. Now, are you trying to pick out the main landmarks of the figure? Thinking about the center line on the torso, the collarbones, looking for the bony bits that stick out on the pelvis, or on the back, the sacrum triangle, the spine line, maybe even seeing the shoulder blades. So in the drawing on the left from a few years ago, I wasn't doing that. I was really just trying to draw a head, some kind of torso, and add some arms and legs. In the drawing on the right, I was starting to think more about landmarks. So I'm starting to try to find that sacrum triangle on the back. I'm trying to see some shoulder blades. I'm not getting everything right. It's still just a few basic landmarks, but I'm starting to see something there. That's all I'm talking about for this first skill level. Are you capturing the angles between those landmarks okay? So the overall angle between the shoulders, the angles of the torso, the angle of the pelvis versus the rib cage. If not, that is something that you can start to work on next. In the drawing on the left, it's very straightened. There's no interesting angles at all. In the drawing in the middle, I'm starting to see more interesting angles. And then on the right, I'm really trying to focus on practicing my angles. I feel like I talk about angles so much on this channel. I feel like angles are kind of the centerpiece of figure drawing. Are you getting the different parts of the figure roughly in proportion to each other? Most people who are starting out really worry about their proportions a lot. It's natural because, you don't want your drawings to kind of look silly, right? Like when they're out of proportion, I used to remember being worried that my figure drawings would look silly. But I've put this third, it's not first. I think that it's more important to start with your landmarks and angles, because it's hard to get your proportions in place when you're not seeing the landmarks and when you're not getting those angles roughly right. Now the second thing is, I've called this rough proportions. I've not called it accuracy. You don't need to be accurate. You don't need to be just like the reference. You just want it to feel reasonably natural. So not have maybe an enormous head and tiny legs or something like that. Your proportions are going to naturally improve with time, but for right now, we're going to use some basic measuring skills and things just to get rough proportions so that the figure feels reasonably natural. That's all that we're going for. So with all of these stages, don't feel like you have to master it before you can move on to the next one. We're going to get into this later, but you're going to be cycling through these. So you're going to come back to these to take a second pass at them and a third pass at them. And as you keep going over them, that's when you're going to start to master them. The first time through, you're just trying to get the basics of it, and then you can move on so that you don't get stuck on one thing for ages, which would be kind of boring, but also not that productive. Are you using a little bit of basic anatomy to help you see things more clearly? Now, I'm not talking about knowing every forearm muscle, just the bigger, simpler stuff. Like, do you know where the pecs start and where they go to? Are you able to visualize where the rib cage is within some figures? You don't need to be perfect here, but are you starting to see some of these ideas sometimes? In the drawing on the left, I've got no real idea of what muscles even do. I didn't really realize that they kind of pull bones closer to each other, or what bones they attach to, or anything like that. In the middle, I'm starting to learn these things. And then on the right, I'm using my basic knowledge more and more. Now, I've got a video planned, which is going to be about what you would learn at the basic anatomy level, what you would learn at the intermediate, and what you would learn at the advanced level. But just keep in mind for now that all we need here is the most basic ideas like the ones I've mentioned here. If you crack open an anatomy book, it's going to have everything in there. You don't want to learn anything. You wouldn't learn a language by reading a dictionary, right? Okay, let's move on. Are you seeing any simplified forms in the figure? So this doesn't have to mean that you draw with cylinders and boxes. It could just mean that you're seeing simple planes and maybe using some cross contour lines. So for this attempt at this pose, I used a cylindrical form for the thigh. The drawing on the left, that's me drawing with no attempt at seeing simple forms. I didn't know what simple forms were back then. In the middle is a very realistic example from my first attempt at seeing these ideas. So you can see on the thighs, I'm trying to show some cross contour lines, how one is coming towards us and one is going back. Is it a beautiful version of a cross contour line? No. Is it perfect and successful? Not really. But it's a big step forward because I'm starting to try this stuff. And then on the right, I'm starting to get to grips with the idea more and more. Okay, so you got to promise me something as we go through this list. When you're looking at your drawings, you're never allowed to beat yourself up for something that is further down the list. I mean, you shouldn't really beat yourself up at all, but especially for things that you haven't even got to that bit of the list yet. You know, if you're walking to the supermarket and you're not 100 meters ahead of where you are now, you wouldn't beat yourself up for that. You would just keep walking, right? So I don't know if that analogy works, but don't beat yourself up. Okay, so are you able to take the complexity of the values in the figure, so all the light and all the dark, all the changes in how light and dark it is, and turn it into a simplified set of shapes of light and dark? So you can see on the left, I'm not even trying to find simple shapes. I'm trying to make it as complicated as I possibly can. But then in the second drawing, I'm trying to simplify the shapes, but I'm still getting caught up in some unnecessary complexity. But I'm trying my best, and that's good. And then on the right, you can see I'm starting to use the simple shapes more and more. Okay, it's time to start thinking about one of the most fun and important aspects of life drawing. We love it so much, we've made more videos about this than anything else. It's gesture. Now, you've actually already started at this point to learn some of the key components of gesture because you've started to simplify more, and more importantly, you started to capture those angles. Good dynamic angles are the heart of gesture, in my opinion. However, there's more to it, including asymmetrical curves, finding big flows through the pose, and thinking about rhythm. Now, we have tons of video on gesture, but notice how late I'm putting this in the list. It's often put in at the start of a course or a book because it's often how you would start a figure drawing. But in my opinion, it's not where you start learning figure drawing. You need those other things in place that I've mentioned before you worry about gesture. But then once you are ready, gesture is something that you should be practicing constantly, and it's going to be part of everything you draw from then on. So in that sense, it's one of the biggest and most important skills that we're going to talk about. Okay, so we're halfway through this list, and before we go on, I have to mention this. With each of these topics, you could go down a rabbit hole with them in terms of the theory and the know-how. But we don't need knowledge here. We need skill. right? We don't need to be smarty pants. We need to be good at these things. And so for example, with perspective, right? The very simple stuff with perspective, like 2 lines converge to a vanishing point. You know, it's like, okay, I kind of get that, but then you could go deeper, right? In terms of your knowledge, you could read more and get into really complicated stuff, and it feels like you're studying hard and you're learning. But the truth is, what you need to get good at for most sketching and drawing, and especially for figure drawing, is just the most basic part that's easy to understand. You need to turn that into intuitive skill. In other words, can you draw a box that feels natural and good, like it has good perspective, just intuitively? If you can do that, then it's really going to help you with your figure drawing. If you know about really complicated perspective stuff, it probably won't help you with your figure drawing. And it's the same with so many of these things. With anatomy, you could go down a rabbit hole with every Latin name of the forearm muscles, etc. But what's going to be more important is something basic, like being able to see the rib cage in lots of different figures. And you can get to the more advanced stuff later on, but right now it's just a waste of time. What you need to do is practice the basics. I have made all of this into a checklist PDF that you can use to assess your drawings. It's going to help you figure out what you need to be practicing depending on where you are in the process. So it's got questions that you would ask yourself as you look at your drawings. And if you can say yes to all of them, you can move to the next skill. But if you can't, it gives you some suggestions for ways you could practice that skill until you can say yes to all of those questions. So the PDF is available to you for free at lovelifedrawing.com/checklist. Now, this journey is not complete. This is just part 1. We have a whole other set of skills to work on, which are going to take us through intermediate and start to get more advanced with figure drawing. So there should be a list of tutorials from us about all these different topics listed below. Depending on which one you need to work on next, check it out. There should also be 2 videos somewhere on the screen to check out, and I'll see you next time.